Hey guys, welcome back to the Out Jeeping YouTube channel. My name is Austin. In today's video, we're going to be replacing the dreaded crank position sensor on this Jeep 4.0. Now we're going to be doing it on my 99 Jeep Cherokee that's equipped with a 4.0 engine. Now today I'm going to show you guys step by step on how to replace it. It's not as hard as what you might have heard, so let's dive in and get started on it. Alright, so before we dive into the Jeep and take off the old sensor, let's first talk about the new sensor that we're going to be replacing it, as well as the issues that come along with a bad crank position sensor, also called CPS. Now you can have a bunch of issues leading up to this. You might have a check engine light, you might have a complete stalling issue where your Jeep won't even start back up, and it might completely just fail on you and you won't have any way of knowing really what's going on. Now I have an issue on my Jeep right now. It did not completely fail, but I do have an intermittent issue while going down the road. I randomly just, the engine cuts out and completely shuts off for like 3 seconds and then shoots back on. So it's been doing it for a while, and I want to get it replaced today since I don't want to be stranded when it completely fails on me. But you still might have other issues that lead up to this. It's kind of a weird sensor. Once it starts going out, you'll have weird issues. So you might have it where it just stalls and you have to throw it back into park and restart it, and then it might keep going, or it completely dies like I said earlier and you won't be able to start it back up. Might get some check engine lights, etc. But once you pinpointed it down that your crank position sensor is bad, what you want to do is replace it with a good brand crank position sensor. And what you really want to do is go with the original OEM one, which is made by Mopar. So that's what I got here today that we're going to be replacing it on my Jeep Cherokee. You want to stay away from the cheap $15 ones. Yeah, it might be cheap and easy to do right away, but odds are it's going to fail in a couple months and might leave you left on the side of the road stranded. So to track down a Mopar crank position sensor for my 4.0, it was a little bit harder than most parts on it, since it wasn't easily on Amazon or on Rock Auto at the time of purchase on this. I actually had to go through my local dealership and order it through them, which took a couple weeks. In the end, it spent around $100 shipped to me. So overall, it is a little bit more pricier, but you're getting that reliability. If the original one in here lasted over 300,000 miles, I'm pretty sure that this one right here can as well, since it is the same exact part. Now talking about 4.0s and what crank position sensor goes along with them, they did change them a little bit throughout the years. Depends on the manual and automatic transmission, as well as the year of the 4.0. On this 99 Jeep Cherokee, I got a part number right here, which I'll also link it down in the description below, but it's 560-27866AC, and I believe on the 2000 and 2001 XJ Cherokees they have a little bit different design on the crank position sensor. I think the wires are a little bit longer, and I think on the 96 and down they're also a little bit different as well. But overall on this installation, it's going to be the same exact process. The only thing different is just going to be the plug ends and the length of the wire and how the sensor is built internally. So now that we talked about the sensor, let's dive into the Jeep here, see how our old one is located, and the best plan of attack on getting that one out and replaced. Alright, so looking inside the engine bay here, obviously once again this is a 4.0 inline 6 engine, and right here on the back of our intake manifold on the driver's side we have a plug that is right here, and if we follow that wire it goes all the way back to the top of the transmission bell housing, and on top of there is where our crank position sensor is located and bolted on. So the first thing we're going to do is actually disconnect our electrical connector right here. It looks like it's clipped into a plastic clip right here, and it looks like someone added a zip tie over there just to kind of hold it out of the way for now. So I'm going to cut that, and then we'll disconnect this connection right here to get started. I'm just going to pry that out of the bracket so it pops out just like that. And then we got our connector. We're going to push in on the clip and separate them. There we go. That is now separated and loose right there. Alright, so taking a little bit closer look at the crank position sensor. Might be a little bit hard to see, but I'm putting the camera directly on top of the bell housing, and I actually have, looks to be a transmission breather line just kind of in the way. But if I move our breather tube out of the way a little bit, you can see within all that dirt and everything like that, where our pigtail goes into the top right there, that little nub, that is going to be the top of the sensor. And That is held in by 2 bolts that actually are bolted and face towards the front of the Jeep, and they're going to be an 11mm head on those. So as far as getting those 2 bolts out, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it from the bottom side with a bunch of extensions and swivels and everything like that, or you can do it from the top, and it's going to be nice and handy if you have one of these ratcheting wrenches that also bends at the end here, because you can set your angle right here and push it down and then start working off those bolts right there. I'm actually going to start with this method first. If it doesn't work out, I'm going to switch to the bottom and get a bunch of extensions and take it off that way, because that's usually how most people do it. Alright, so a little change of plans. Decided I'm going to actually attack this from underneath, since my hand is a little bit too big to get that wrench in there and wasn't really making much progress. So what I have instead is actually a 11mm socket with a swivel with 3 6-inch extensions on here going down to our ratchet. So as you can see on the screen, we have 2 bolts holding on that crank position sensor. We're going to try and get those off. So I'm on the top bolt right now. Might fall off a couple times because that swivel is on a severe angle, but nonetheless it is loosening up. Alright, so that bolt is free. I'm going to come in from the top and actually remove that bolt completely. There we go. Alright, so a little pro tip, you can actually take a little bit of electrical tape and wrap it around that swivel, so that way it won't just keep flopping 90 degrees on you as you're trying to line this up. So that's what I'm doing right here. And it does help to have one of your hands kind of brace the whole extensions into one place, so that way it doesn't torque the whole thing, because once it does that, it slips off. Alright, so I got it pretty loose. I'm going to go from the top again, stick my hand on there, finish taking that bolt off, and then the whole sensor should come out. There's that bolt, and then we'll pull the sensor out of the bell housing. Alright, so I got the new sensor and old sensor side by side up here in the workbench. We want to make sure we have the exact same sensor. So looking over it, it looks like we have the same exact length of wire, and our plugs look like they match up as well. Now you might notice this little rubber thing right here. This was just a little guard that was plugging that hole where the sensor goes into the bell housing. So all we're going to do is just transfer this over to the new one. That's going to sit like that. And then we'll weave this down into the top, and I'm going to start the bolts by hand, get that as far as I can, and then we'll finish tightening it up how we took it off with a bunch of extensions up from the underside. So I'm going to clean this up, get all the grease and crap off of there, and then we'll get ready to throw this one in. Alright, so as you guys saw, I was actually able to install it with that ratchet wrench like I was talking about earlier. So it goes to show that you can do it both from the top and from the bottom. I was able to get that ratchet wrench on there, and this one actually locks into place with this ratchet right here, which is nice. So it'll keep pressure on that bolt from the top side as you're working it on. So now that we have those 2 bolts nice and tight, we're all done down here. Let's go up to the top and finish by plugging in our electrical connector. Alright, lastly, all we got to do is plug this in. So we got our new plug coming up from the transmission bell housing. We'll plug that into our wiring harness, and it should snap in. Just like so. And then we got this little clip on the new harness. We're going to stick through the original hole. So that's going to hold that into place. And that is all nicely installed. Now last thing we got to do is fire this thing up, make sure I have no issues. We'll know right away, since it won't fire if it's not going to work, basically, because the engine computer needs that crank signal in order for our ignition to work. So let's fire it up. Alright, there we go. Seems to be working and actually fires up a lot faster than it did before. I was thinking that my fuel pump was maybe going bad again, since it takes a while to crank up sometimes, but that fired up right away how it should. Alright guys, that's going to be a wrap for today's video. Hopefully this video helps you on replacing that crank position sensor on your 4.0 engine. I believe the 2.5 is very similar as well. And overall, it's just a hard location to get at, but you can still get it from the top if you want to use our ratchet wrench right here, or you can get it from the bottom. Just use a bunch of extensions on a swivel. Either way, it achieved the job as you guys saw here today. Now, if you want to thank yourself in the future, if you have your old crank position sensor and it isn't completely dead, maybe you just had an intermittent issue, go ahead and clean this up and throw it in the Jeep as well, because you never know, these things spontaneously like to go bad, and if you have one just for a spare that you can easily swap, even if you're miles away from home, it's better than not having anything at all. So I'm going to do that and throw that back into the Jeep. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and if you guys have any questions or comments, make sure to post them below and I'll be happy to get back to you. If you guys want to help the channel, check out the Outjeeping Etsy store. I'll leave a link in the description below, as well as that crank position sensor. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Outjeeping YouTube channel to help keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next video.